The first thing Damaris Caldwell did when she heard the window shatter at 2:47 in the morning was not scream. She didn't gasp. She didn't freeze. She didn't do any of the reasonable, sensible things that a normal woman living in a luxury penthouse in Gangnam would do when the sound of breaking glass split the silence like a gunshot. What she did was sit up in bed, tilt her head to the side like she was calculating something, and say, out loud to no one, "Oh, these fools did not." Then she got up. Now, to understand why this matters, you need to understand the kind of woman Damaris Caldwell was. She was 29 years old, Memphis-born and Memphis-raised, the kind of city that put iron in your spine before you were old enough to drive. She had the posture of a woman who had never once in her life walked into a room and felt like she didn't belong there. She wore silk pajamas to bed, champagne-colored, because she had taste, and she kept her edges laid even on Sunday mornings when she wasn't going anywhere. She believed deeply in three things: excellence, unbothered energy, and the fact that embarrassment was a choice you made for yourself. She was also, professionally speaking, the personal manager of Kwon Seok-hyun, one of the most powerful, most feared, and most relentlessly unsmiling men in all of Seoul. She had been working for him for 14 months. In that time, she had reorganized his entire business portfolio, tripled the performance of 2 of his legitimate entertainment companies, negotiated 3 deals that his previous team had fumbled for years, and coordinated his personal schedule with the precision of someone who had been built specifically for this purpose. She had also spent the better part of those 14 months trying and failing to make him laugh. Not because it was her job. It wasn't. It was a personal project. A private, ongoing, deeply entertaining challenge that she had set for herself sometime around week 3, when she had made what she privately considered the funniest observation of her entire career, and Kwon Seok-hyun had looked at her with those flat, dark eyes of his and simply said, "Is the quarterly report ready?" The man did not laugh. He did not smile. He did not react to humor the way human beings reacted to humor. He existed in a state of permanent, glacial composure, and the world seemed to organize itself quietly around that fact the way rivers organize themselves around stone. His men feared him. His associates respected him with the particular reverence people reserved for things they didn't fully understand. His enemies, from what Damaris had gathered, mostly just stayed out of his way and hoped he forgot they existed. Damaris found him fascinating. She also found him deeply, personally irritating, which she had decided was basically the same thing. She thought about all of this in approximately 1 second as she stepped out of her bedroom and into the long, dark hallway of the penthouse, because her brain worked fast and her feet worked faster. The penthouse had a layout she knew by heart. She had been staying in the guest suite for the past 3 days while her own apartment was being renovated. A fact Seok-hyun had agreed to with exactly one word: fine. She knew where every room was. She knew where the kitchen was. More importantly, she knew what was in the kitchen. She heard voices downstairs. Low, male voices moving with the specific kind of careful quiet that people used when they were trying not to be heard, which always, in Damaris's extensive personal experience with foolishness, meant they were about to do something worth being loud about. She counted 3 of them by the sound of their footsteps. She moved to the kitchen first. Later, people would ask her why she didn't just call for security or wake Seok-hyun or lock herself in a room and wait. The honest answer was that none of those options had occurred to her as interesting. The interesting option was the one she was already doing, which involved pulling open the pantry door with the quiet efficiency of a woman who had decided something. The pantry was extraordinarily well-stocked. Seok-hyun's housekeeper ran a tight operation. There were imported goods, artisan supplies, things she didn't recognize and things she absolutely did. Her hand found the flour first. A large bag, the heavy kind, the kind that sat in the back of the shelf and meant business. She picked it up. Then she found the cornstarch. Then she found a bottle of what she was fairly certain was some kind of dark vinegar, which smelled horrible and was therefore perfect. Then she found the cooking oil. She lined them up on the counter in front of her with the calm, focused energy of a woman preparing for something she had every intention of winning. Downstairs, the voices were getting louder, bolder. They thought the place was empty. She could tell by the way they were moving now, less careful, more confident. One of them laughed at something, and the sound of it annoyed her deeply because they were in Siakian's house, and she had 14 months of investment in this operation, and she was not about to let 3 people with poor decision-making skills compromise it. She picked up the flower. She heard Siakian's bedroom door open down the hall. He moved like silence when he wanted to. She had noticed that early, the way big, commanding men sometimes had the unexpected ability to exist without sound when the situation required it. She heard nothing but sensed him anyway, the particular shift in air pressure that came with his presence. And then she saw the shadow of him in the hallway light, tall and broad and still, watching her standing in the kitchen in her silk pajamas holding a 5-kilogram bag of flour like a woman with a plan. He looked at the flour. He looked at her. His expression said nothing because his expression never said anything, but she could see in the slight adjustment of his posture that he was trying to understand what he was witnessing. She put one finger to her lips. Then she pointed down the stairs. Then she pointed at the flower. His eyes returned to the flower. Something moved in them. Not a laugh, not even close, not yet. But something. A flicker. The first distant suggestion of a human reaction. He said nothing. He stepped back against the wall and watched. She went downstairs. What happened in the next 4 minutes would be discussed. In low, awed, deeply entertained voices, by Siakian's security team for the next 2 years. There were indeed 3 of them. They were moving through the lower living room with the misguided confidence of men who had done this before and expected it to go the same way. They were dressed in dark clothing, which was, Damaris later acknowledged, the only smart decision they made all evening. She came down the last 3 stairs and assessed the situation in approximately 1 second. Then she opened the flower. The first man turned around just in time to receive the full initial wave of it directly to the face. A generous, committed pour, the kind that didn't apologize for itself. He made a sound that was less a word and more a concept. His hands came up too late. He looked like a ghost. A startled, coughing, deeply undignified ghost. His 2 companions spun around. Damaris was already moving. The second man got the cornstarch, which behaved differently from the flour. Lighter, more theatrical, spreading in a wide, dramatic cloud that settled over him like a fine winter snow and made him look, she thought, genuinely ethereal in the worst possible way. He stumbled back into an armchair. The armchair slid 3 inches on the polished floor. The third man made the mistake of trying to run, which meant he ran directly through the flower cloud still hanging in the air from man number 1, and emerged from it looking seasoned, which she felt was appropriate for someone who had broken into a kitchen. She hit the lights. All 3 of them stood in the sudden brightness of the living room, white-faced, cornstarch-dusted, blinking like they had arrived in a dimension they hadn't booked, and looked at her. She looked back at them. She tilted her head. "Y'all really picked tonight," she said in English, with the particular Memphis cadence that turned a sentence into a verdict. "Of all the nights in all of Seoul." She looked at the first man. "You look like a bao bun, baby. I am so sorry." The second man tried to say something and inhaled cornstarch. She uncapped the vinegar. "I'd really think hard about your next move," she said pleasantly. "Because I have got a whole pantry and absolutely nothing to lose." None of them moved. From the top of the stairs, in the deep quiet of the penthouse, there was a sound. Started small. A breath almost. The kind of sound a person made when they were trying not to do something and losing badly. Then it broke open, low and rough and completely unguarded. The sound of a man who had not laughed in so long that his body had almost forgotten the mechanics of it and was now remembering all at once, helplessly, in the middle of the night in his own home. Kwon Seok-hyun was laughing. Not a polite laugh, not a controlled laugh. A full, undone, cannot stop it laugh, the kind that bent him slightly at the waist and made him press one hand to the wall because he apparently needed the structural support. Damaris looked up at him. He looked down at her, still laughing, and something crossed his face that she had never seen there before. Open, bright, almost startled by itself. Like he was as surprised as anyone. She pointed at him. "See," she said. "I knew you were in there." By 6 a.m, the 3 intruders had been collected by Seok-hyun's security team, who arrived 11 minutes after the incident and spent most of those 11 minutes being briefed by a very calm Damaris while Seok-hyun sat at the kitchen island drinking water and occasionally making the expression of a man trying to reassemble his composure after it had been thoroughly disassembled. The head of security, a solid, dependable man named Juno who had worked for Seok-hyun for 6 years and believed himself to have seen everything, looked at the flower-covered living room, looked at Damaris, looked at Seok-hyun and said nothing for a long moment. "She handled it," Seok-hyun said simply. Juno looked at the flower again. "With pantry goods," Damaris added helpfully. Juno decided he would process this later, when he was alone. The intruders, it turned out, were low-level thieves, no organizational affiliation, no specific intelligence about Seok-hyun's operation, just 3 men who had seen an opportunity in what they thought was a temporarily empty luxury property and made a catastrophically bad series of choices. They were handled efficiently and without fanfare. The security team swept the premises. The housekeeper was called. The living room was restored. Seok-hyun and Damaris were left alone in the kitchen at 6:15 in the morning. The pale, early light of Seoul beginning to come through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city spread out quiet and gray and enormous below them. She made coffee because she was already up and the situation demanded it. He sat at the island and watched her move around his kitchen with the same ease she moved through everything. Unhurried, precise, entirely at home in whatever space she occupied. "You weren't scared," he said. "It was not a question of them." She didn't look up from the coffee machine. "No. Most people would have been." "Most people," she said, sliding a cup across the island toward him, "don't have a Memphis upbringing and a surplus of baking supplies." He looked at the coffee. He looked at her. "Thank you," he said. She blinked. In 14 months, it was the first time he had said those 2 words to her in a context that wasn't contractually required. She recovered quickly because she was Damaris Caldwell and she recovered from everything quickly, but she noted it internally, filed it somewhere careful. "Don't thank me," she said. "Thank whoever decided to stock that pantry with 5 kilos of flour." The corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile, not quite, but the architecture of one. The suggestion of one, waiting just beneath the surface. She saw it and said nothing. She drank her coffee. That was the thing about Damaris that most people didn't understand until they'd known her a while. She was loud when she wanted to be, sharp and funny and entirely unafraid to fill a room with her energy. But she also knew exactly when to be quiet. She knew the value of a moment. She knew when to let something sit. She let this one sit. He drank his coffee. The city woke up below them, slow and then all at once. After a while he said, "Your quarterly performance review for Gile Entertainment is scheduled for Thursday." "I'm aware," she said. "The board will push back on the restructuring proposal." "I know. I've already prepared for that." He looked at her. "How?" She reached across the island, picked up her phone from where she'd set it earlier, and pulled up a document. She slid it toward him. He read it. His eyes moved with the particular focus speed of someone who absorbed information quickly and missed nothing. He read for 2 minutes without speaking. "You preempted their 3 main objections," he said. "Preempted them and buried them," she said. "By page 4 they won't have anything left to push back on." He set the phone down. He looked at her with an expression she had learned, over 14 months. To read as the closest thing he had to impress. Good, he said. She picked up her coffee. I know. He almost smiled again. She almost let herself notice. Word got out. It always did in Siakyan's world, where information moved like water through every crack, and the story of what had happened in the penthouse spread through the network with remarkable speed. By afternoon, Damaris was aware that she had become, in certain circles, something of a figure. She found out the way she found out most things. From Siakyan's personal aide, a young man named Ryun-ho who was earnest and efficient and deeply transparent in ways that served Damaris beautifully. They're calling you the manager, Ryun-ho told her, with the bright, slightly nervous energy of someone delivering news they weren't sure how she'd receive. I am the manager, she said. No, like the manager, he repeated with audible capitalization. As in, a title. She stopped walking. They're saying you faced down 3 men in Mr. Kwan's house and sent them out looking like Tiok and that Mr. Kwan. He hesitated. That Mr. Kwan what? Ryun-ho's expression became something complicated. That he laughed. The silence that followed was interesting. People don't believe it, Ryun-ho added quickly. They think it's exaggerated. But also, the security team confirms it, so. Ryun-ho, she said. Yes. Clear my 2 o'clock. I need to prep for Thursday and I want it uninterrupted. Of course. He paused. Do you want me to say anything? To the people who are asking. She considered. Tell them the flour was unseasoned, she said. I want them to know I showed restraint. Ryun-ho stared at her. She walked away. 2 floors up, in his office, Siakyan was in a meeting with 3 of his senior men, the kind of meeting that happened behind closed doors and involved very few words and a great deal of understood meaning. His lead strategist was speaking. The others were listening with the attentiveness of people who understood that inattentiveness had consequences. Siakyan was listening too, but some part of him, some small, recently unlocked, deeply inconvenient part, was replaying the image of Damaris Caldwell standing in his living room at 3 in the morning in champagne silk, holding a bag of flour, looking at 3 grown men like they had personally offended her standards. You'll really pick tonight. He returned his attention to the meeting, but the corner of his mouth did the thing again. His strategist noticed. He said nothing because he had good instincts, but his eyes moved briefly to the other 2 men, and a look passed between them that said, clearly and without words, something has changed. The problem, and Damaris recognized it as a problem with the brisk, unsentimental clarity she applied to all problems, was that Kwan Siakyan was genuinely hard not to like. Not because he was easy. He was not easy. He was demanding in the particular way that excellent people were demanding, not unreasonably, not cruelly, but with a precision that left no room for approximation. He knew what good work looked like and he expected it, consistently without apology. He communicated in the fewest words necessary to convey meaning. He made decisions fast and didn't revisit them. He had the focused, forward-facing energy of a man who did not waste anything. Not time, not resources, not words, not attention. When he gave you his attention, you felt it. That was the thing. When Siakyan was actually present in a conversation, actually engaged, it was like standing in direct light, specific and warm and a little disarming if you weren't used to it. Damaris was used to it because she had made herself used to it, because she was professional and sensible and had absolutely no interest in complicating a working relationship that was, by any objective measure, the best professional position she had ever held. That was what she told herself. She was telling herself this on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after the flower incident, while she sat across from him in his private office running him through the revised proposal for the acquisition of a mid-sized entertainment label that she had spent the past 6 days reshaping from something adequate into something excellent. The initial valuation was too high, she said, moving through the slides with the efficient authority of someone who had done the homework and knew exactly what they were talking about. I went back to the fundamentals. Their catalog has value, but their operational model has 3 structural problems. I've outlined them on page 9. Fix those, and the acquisition pays back in under 4 years. Don't fix them, and you're buying a liability. I recommend we make the offer conditional on operational restructuring within the first 18 months. Siekyun had been reading as she spoke, his eyes tracking the document with that fast, absorbing focus she'd come to associate with him. He got to page 9. He read it. You identified the 3rd issue, he said. The distribution model issue? Yes. My previous advisors missed it. Your previous advisors, she said carefully, were reading the surface numbers. You have to go 3 layers down to see it. He looked up from the document. He looked at her with that direct, specific attention. And there it was, that feeling she refused to name, the slight recalibration in her chest that she had been professionally ignoring for approximately 6 weeks. Make the offer, he said. Conditional as you proposed. Already drafted, she said, and slid another document across the desk. He picked it up. Read it. Set it down. Is there anything you come to me unprepared for? He asked. No, she said simply. That's why you pay me. That's not why I pay you, he said. She paused. What? I pay many people to be prepared, he said. You are the only one who is also correct. She absorbed that. She kept her expression steady, because she was Damaris Caldwell and she had done harder things than receive a compliment without flinching. Well, she said after a moment, add it to my performance review. The corner of his mouth moved. I will, he said. The shift, when it happened the way most real things happened. Not dramatically, not with announcement, but quietly and then all at once. It was a Thursday evening. She had been in back-to-back meetings since 8 in the morning. The Gile Entertainment Board review had gone exactly as she'd predicted, and she had handled it exactly as she'd prepared. And by 7 o'clock she was in the small sitting room adjacent to his office with her heels off and her feet tucked. Under her on the chair, reviewing notes on her tablet with the focused, slightly glazed energy of someone running on excellence and caffeine. She heard the door and didn't look up. The board confirmed, Siekyun said. I know. Juno texted me. You buried them by page 4. I said I would. She looked up then. He was still in his full formal suit, which meant he'd come directly from the boardroom, which meant he hadn't stopped anywhere between there and here. Something about that landed quietly. He sat down across from her. Not at his desk. In the chair across from her. Close, the way people sat when they weren't thinking about the geometry of the room and were just sitting. The Gile restructuring, he said. You pushed for it for 4 months before I approved it. You took a while, she agreed pleasantly. I was testing whether you'd hold your position. She looked at him. And you never moved, he said. There was something in his voice that wasn't quite admiration but was adjacent to it, close enough that she could feel the warmth of it. Most people, when I push back, adjust their position. You just waited, like you already knew you were right. I did know I was right, she said. Being right doesn't require your agreement. He was quiet for a moment. No, he said. It doesn't. She held his gaze. He held hers. And for the first time in 14 months, the silence between them felt like something chosen rather than something inevitable. Like something they were both sitting in deliberately because they wanted to. She looked away first. She had rules. It's late, she said. I have an 8 a.m. call with the Tokyo team. I know, he said. I approved it. Then you know I should sleep. I know you should, he said. And I know you won't, because you're going to spend the next 2 hours over-preparing for a call you could handle in your sleep. She stared at him. He looked back at her with the flat, composed expression she had spent 14 months trying to crack, and somewhere deep in it, in the very back of it, something warm was looking out at her. You know me, she said. came out quieter than she intended. "I've been paying attention," he said. She stood up. She picked up her tablet. She picked up her shoes. "Good night, Seokyun," she said. Not Mr. Kwan, which was what she always called him, what everyone called him, what the entire professional architecture of their relationship had always called him. His name. Just his name. He looked at her. The warmth in his expression moved forward, just slightly, like it was deciding something. "Good night, Damaris," he said. She left. She walked down the long corridor to her office and closed the door and stood in the middle of the room for a solid 30 seconds. Completely still, before she said, quietly and with feeling, "Absolutely not." Then she sat down and overprepared for the Tokyo call. She didn't acknowledge it for 3 more weeks. This was a conscious, professional, and frankly impressive act of will, and she was proud of it. She filed documents and ran numbers and restructured a media company and negotiated 2 contracts that made Seokyun's legal team openly emotional with relief, and she was excellent and present and completely professionally appropriate, and she did not think about the way his voice had said, "I've been paying attention," in a quiet room at 7:30 in the evening. She thought about it a little, but she was disciplined about when. The situation was forced into clarity, as situations always were eventually, by an external event which in this case took the form of a charity gala at a luxury hotel in Jongno, the kind of event that Seoul's money attended and watched each other at, the kind of room where how you moved through it was a statement and who stood next to you was a declaration. Seokyun attended these things occasionally. Damaris managed his appearances with surgical precision. When to go, when to send a representative, how long to stay, who to be seen with, who to avoid. She had built his public profile the way an architect built a load-bearing wall. Deliberately and with full knowledge of what it was holding up. She had planned to wait outside in the car, as she usually did. He said, "You're coming in." She looked at him. "I'm not on the guest list. I added you." "When?" "Yesterday." She opened her mouth, closed it. "That's not protocol." "I know," he said, in a tone that meant he had evaluated the protocol and found it insufficient. She went in. She wore burgundy. Deep, rich burgundy with a structured bodice and wide-leg trousers that moved with her like they'd been made for exactly this kind of room. Because they had been, because she did not go anywhere unprepared. She wore her hair up, gold earrings, heels that added 3 inches to her already considerable presence. She looked like money and intention, and a woman who had never once apologized for either. The room noticed. Rooms always noticed Damaris, not because she asked them to, but because she was the kind of person whose energy arrived slightly before she did, announcing itself. She noticed the room noticing, cataloged it efficiently, and focused on her job, which tonight was to navigate Seokyun through a very specific subset of interactions that would serve specific strategic purposes, and then extract them both before the evening became social rather than useful. She was good at it. She was always good at it. She moved through the room with him, and she was fluid and sharp and exactly the right degree of warm to exactly the right people, and she watched Seokyun watch her work with an expression she had learned by now to read accurately. He was proud. That was what it was. It sat on him quietly, the way all his feelings sat on him. Compressed, restrained, barely visible. But she could see it, and the seeing of it did something unruly to her chest. "You're doing it again," she said. During a brief moment when they were standing slightly apart from the nearest conversation, both holding glasses they weren't drinking. "Doing what?" "The thing where you watch me like you're keeping score." He looked at her. "I'm not keeping score." "Then what are you doing?" A pause. In 14 months she had learned his pauses, the functional ones, the strategic ones, the ones where he was deciding whether to say a true thing. This was the last kind. "Watching you," he said, "because I like watching you work." She kept her expression steady. She had gotten very good at this. "That's a conflict of interest," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm your manager. I'm aware. This is complicated. Everything worthwhile is." She turned to look at him fully, and he looked back at her, and the noise of the gala, the music, the conversation, the clink of expensive glasses, faded to something distant and irrelevant. "Sia-kyun," she said. "Damaris," he said. "If this goes wrong," she said, "it will be spectacularly, professionally wrong. I know. I'm from Memphis. I don't do things halfway. If I'm in something, I'm in it. I know that too. Do you?" She held his gaze. "Because I need you to understand what that means before you. I've been in something for 8 months, he said quietly. I've been waiting for you to catch up. She stared at him. 8 months. The day you told the Tokyo board their projections were adorably optimistic, he said. That was the day. She had never in her adult life been rendered speechless. It lasted approximately 4 seconds. That's a very strange moment to fall for someone, she said. You were right, he said simply. You were right. You knew you were right, and you didn't soften it for anyone. I was going to soften it, she admitted. And then I looked at those numbers again, and I couldn't do it. I know, he said. That's the day. She laughed. Fully unguarded, the real laugh, the Memphis one, the one she didn't edit. It came out of her like warmth and relief and the particular joy of being completely, absolutely seen. He watched it happen. He watched her laugh, and something in his face went open and full and entirely undone. The same way it had at the top of the stairs with 3 flower-covered men in his living room. Helpless, surprised, beautiful. You're doing it again, she said when she caught her breath. What? Smiling. I'm not. He stopped. He was smiling at her, quietly, completely. You've got a whole face, she informed him. Under there. So I've been told, he said. Only by me. Only by you, he confirmed. She looked at him for a long moment. The gala moved around them, oblivious. Somewhere across the room, she was aware of eyes. She was always aware of eyes. People noticing the way they were standing, the specific proximity, the conversation that was clearly not professional even to someone who couldn't hear it. Let them look. She had stopped managing perceptions about 4 minutes ago. After this, she said, we're getting proper food, not gala food, real food, anywhere you want, he said. And then, she said, we're going to talk about what this looks like professionally, because I'm not blowing up a career I built for feelings, even good ones. Agreed, he said, and meant it, and she could tell he meant it. And then, she said, after all of that, she tilted her head. We'll see. He nodded. He was still smiling, small, warm, private, the smile of a man who had waited 8 months and could wait a little longer because he already knew where this was going. They stayed until the strategic end of the evening because she had a job to do and she did it, and then they left together and Seoul was dark and lit and enormous around them, and they talked for 3 hours over food that was absolutely not gala caliber and was therefore perfect. They talked about everything. About Memphis and what it built in you. About what it meant to hold power carefully and what happened when people didn't. About the acquisition and the Tokyo call and the 3 things she thought he should do differently in his public-facing operations. About his family briefly, which he never discussed, and she didn't push, but she listened completely, and he seemed to understand the value of that. About the flower. They talked about the flower. You were testing something, he said, that night. Not just handling the situation. I always knew you were in there, she said. Behind all that. She gestured at his entire composure. Glacial professionalism? I was going to say expensive silence, but yes. He laughed again. Easier this time. It came out without the surprise of it, without the shock of a rusty thing starting up. Just warmth, just real, just his. She thought it might be the best sound she had ever heard. She would not tell him that yet. She was from Memphis. She had standards about timing. But she tucked it somewhere careful and warm and held it there. 6 months later, the people who moved in Siakian's world had fully adjusted to the fact of Damaris Caldwell. Not just as his manager, though she remained ferociously, legendarily that, but as the woman who stood next to him in rooms and laughed freely and called him out with the specific fearlessness of someone who knew exactly who she was and had decided he was worth it. His businesses continued to perform extraordinarily. People attributed this to many things. The ones who paid attention attributed it to her. She renegotiated her contract. Upward. Significantly. He signed it without hesitation, which she considered both professionally satisfying and personally revealing. He laughed more now. Not recklessly. He was still Kwon Seok-hyun, still composed, still the kind of man rooms reorganized themselves around. But there was something alive in him that hadn't been there before, something that showed up in the corner of his mouth at precisely the wrong moments and made his senior team quietly, reverently happy in ways they didn't fully discuss out loud. Juno, the head of security, told his wife the whole story one evening. The flour, the cornstarch, the vinegar. His wife said, "She sounds incredible." Juno thought about Damaris Caldwell standing in the living room at 3 in the morning with her silk pajamas and her baking supplies, looking at 3 grown men like they were a mild inconvenience she was prepared for. "She really is," he said. And somewhere across Seoul, in a restaurant they had made their place. Not fancy, not a statement, just good and real, and there's... Damaris was telling Seok-hyun about a deal she was going to close on Friday, gesturing with her chopsticks in a way that was technically a table manner violation, and he was watching her with that open, warm, fully alive expression that had become the most recognizable thing about his face. She pointed at him mid-sentence. "Don't," she said. "I'm not doing anything," he said. "You're looking at me like that." "Like what?" She gave him a look that contained the entire history of them. The flower, the silence, the long, slow walk from professional to real. He smiled. Full, certain, entirely unbothered. "You started it," he said. She had absolutely no rebuttal for that. She smiled back.
Hello besties, in this story we learned that the right person won't try to change you, they will laugh because of you, show up unbothered, show up prepared, never shrink for a room. The one who truly sees you doesn't need convincing. Be a full package, the rest will follow. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like, subscribe and share.